Great rewards don't wait, so why should you? Through the InVigor Book and Buy Grower program, you could earn a $30 per bag rebate when you book all of your InVigor hybrid canola by November 14th. Talk to your retailer. Terms and conditions apply.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 at Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Tuesday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. And a big shout out and thank you to Lindsay Smith for sitting in this host chair all last week. I do greatly appreciate it. It's great to be back. There's a lot happened in the week that I was gone, and we're going to try to catch up as much as possible throughout this week as there's more to come, I'm sure, as well. Okay, today on the program, we're going to hear from Jacob Shapiro of Bespoke Group. I recorded a new Frontlines podcast for RealAgriculture.com. We're going to play the portion of the discussion where we talk about those U.S.-Canada trade issues and friends off again, I guess. We'll see what Jacob has to say about that. We've got Clint Jurke from BASF to talk about Clubroot. We've also got Tyler Fulton from CCA to talk about some beef trade issues. And we'll finish up today with Neil Bentley, who is the VP of Market Management at BASF out of Raleigh, North Carolina, and talk about some of the future of farming and some of the innovation and research and all those kinds of things. Looking forward to playing that conversation with Neil with you. Okay, if you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. You can also text that line as well. So you can call, leave a voicemail, or you can text 855-776-6147. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we've got Jacob Shapiro of Bespoke Group. We're talking Canada, U.S., Mexico trade negotiations. Where do we go from here? When are we back? When are we friends on again?
I'm Lindsay Smith, and joining me now for this product spotlight, it's Tyler Gullen, Technical Services Manager with New Farm.
We just received registration for a new soil active herbicide, Valterra cereals. Really nice option that growers can spray in the fall just before freeze up, or else in the spring once that snow melts too. I think to me there's three main benefits to those soil actives. Firstly, you get that residual weed control. You can catch that first flush of weeds in the spring, kill them off before you go and seed, and that can lead to cleaner fields, getting that crop off to a great start, and really keep more of that moisture and nutrients available to that crop. The second benefit is as a resistant management tool. It's kind of your one shot in the year to mix up that routine that those weeds like and really get ahead of those weeds and that resistance. The third reason is just full flexibility, and you can apply these in the fall once harvest is wrapped up and things slow down on the farm a little bit. So you don't have to drag that sprayer out as early that crazy spring seeding season. You don't really have to rush back out as if you would if you didn't have those residuals. You can visit our website at newfarm.ca. Definitely if you're kind of for AgriTrade November 5th to 7th, come chat with us at that booth. It's 418 in the Prairie Pavilion.
I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture. Time is running out. If you don't act now, your canola savings for next year will be gone. Like zilch. Evaporated. Save up to $75 per bag on canola with DeKalb Harvest Rewards, but only until Halloween, October 31st, which is coming up this Friday. Visit DeKalbRewards.ca for details and talk to your local DeKalb canola seed retailer. Okay, one of the podcasts that I love doing every month is a discussion that I have with Jacob Shapiro of the Bespoke Group. He's based in New Orleans, Louisiana. Him and I have been, we met on the road. I think it was actually at the Northern Pulse Growers meeting in Minot, North Dakota, going back 4 or 5 years ago. We've kept in touch. I talk to Jacob once a month, and we really try to break down all of the different geopolitical things that are happening around the world, and there's an abundance of them for sure. I'm going to play you a clip of an episode that just got published today. Encourage you to check that out at RealAgriculture.com. I asked Jacob about this kind of friends off right now between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, on the trade negotiations front, and that Ford commercial that President Trump really strongly reacted to. Here's what Jacob and I had to say about it. Yeah, when we heard the president talk about how, Argentina is an ally and we have to treat, I can't remember the exact quote, but it was on Air Force One, and basically, they're an ally. We got to help them. And I thought immediately, from a Mexican or Canadian perspective, where that's kind of interesting comment, because both Mexico and Canada are having a really hard time being treated like an ally. And we saw that was it Thursday night into Friday, because of the ad that the Ontario government was running using the rearranged words of Ronald Reagan, but they were the words of Ronald Reagan. It was not AI like the president had claimed. Increased tariffs and negotiations off for now. I guess we've seen this playbook already, where negotiations were off. What do you make of what's going on in these trilateral negotiations between these three neighbors, which has been one of the most successful trade agreements in the world?
Well, and for the Canadian listeners, don't think you're alone. And also for the Mexican listeners, don't think you're alone, because similar questions are being asked in Seoul and Tokyo and in European capitals and even in Turkey. Like, these are countries that are actual U.S. allies with actual U.S. defense treaty relationships. There's no U.S. defense treaty relationship with Argentina. The United States has not pledged to go to Argentina's aid, and vice versa. To call Argentina an ally, that's an aspiration. That's a future policy. That's not a statement of fact today. And the Trump administration has been arguably much tougher on its quote-unquote allies than it has been on its adversaries or on some of these other countries that it's been willing to court. So I think that's the first thing I'll say. The second thing I'll say, though, and hopefully this is there's both a positive and negative spin to this. I mean, I put U.S. relations with Canada and Mexico in a completely different bucket versus U.S. trade relations with the rest of the world. I think that if the United States is going to author this new trade policy with tariffs and protectionism and nearshoring and everything else, they need Canada and they need Mexico, and they need the USMCA to be renegotiated and approved speedily in our days. You might also remember, in the first Trump administration, I think that Mexico and Canada got the better of the United States in that renegotiation, and I think that was because the first version of President Trump in the first administration didn't know what he was doing. He thought that he could just throw his weight around and that all of the working groups and bureaucratic levers that have to be pulled to negotiate a really complex trade treaty would just fall in line. And that's not how it works. He had trouble staffing the meetings where all of the different provisions and components of the new USMCA were being negotiated. So at the top level, he was making fun of Trudeau and he was shaking hands with AMLO and everything was going fine. But in those rooms where the actual deal was being negotiated, he didn't have the best and the brightest, and the Canadians and the Mexicans were getting the better of it. I think he knows that. I think he's learned it the second time around. I think he wants to renegotiate the USMCA and make up for those shortcomings so that he can officially put the Trump brand on it and say, this is the Trump free trade deal for North America, and I'm proud of it, and it is good for the United States. And so I think all of this, everything with Canada, everything with Mexico, I think it's all a soap opera that leads into the renegotiation of the USMCA and the eventual approval of it for another 16 years or however many years they have to reapprove it for in July. I think that's what it's a part of. So the positive spin here is I'm saying I expect this to be ephemeral. I think the U.S. and Canada will get back to being friends as soon as the USMCA is renegotiated and approved going forward. The negative side of this is it's October 2025. We could be doing this literally until July. And I've been banging this drum, I think, with you for 6 or 7 months now. I've been saying, like, this is going to suck. It's going to be a melodrama for anybody who cares about U.S.-Canada relations or who would just like the governments to get out of the way so that business can be done. Like, this is really infuriating because even if I'm right, it's a high conviction view that I have, I could be wrong. There's enough uncertainty that you're going to have to plan for, well, what if this blows up in my face? And when President Trump does terminate trade negotiations and raises a 10% tariff in the context of everything else, well, how do I interpret that? Is Jacob crazy? Is he just looking at the world through rose-colored glasses? So I fully appreciate that this administration in particular is going to test my optimism, but I'm sticking to my guns here. I would be absolutely flummoxed if this is where we are a year from now.
Yeah, I'm on the same path as you. I've been saying in a lot of interviews where people ask, what is the future of this? It is going to be ugly. It is going to be rocky, and it is going to test everything in your memory in terms of this relationship. But at the end of the day, even the United States needs the agreement, and saying no deal with some other country around the world is different than saying no deal with a Canada or Mexico. Whether you like the fact that this is how the infrastructure is built and where we have been the past 20, 30 years with this trading relationship when they really took it off with NAFTA, it's an economic reality that it is an immense benefit to all three countries. And so, but it is going to be ugly. And a part of it is the show. It's the look, we are doing something and we are making sure we're getting the best deal. And that's happening in Canada too. Let's be honest. There's some, all politics are local at some point, as the saying goes. And so I think in Canada, there's a huge elbows up crowd, and they want the prime minister to push back as hard as possible. He seems, what's been kind of interesting to me, Jacob, he seems very overeager. You've got Trump sort of playing ducking and weaving, and I don't know if we really need this deal. And Carney's like full throttle ahead. He almost looks too eager at times. If there was maybe to be a little bit of criticism, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't envy Mark Carney his job, because that is his job. It is not good for Canada if you don't do everything possible to placate the United States and get all of this insanity stopped and get that successful renegotiation on the best possible terms for Canada. And for any Canadian prime minister, I don't care what their ideology is, which party they are, they're going to have to suck up and kiss President Trump's ass, if you'll pardon my French. And,
yep.
I mean, just look at the way this is looked around the world. The countries that are doing the best with Trump on trade are the ones that kissed up to him. And some of them kissed up to him and didn't even get it. India is sitting there being like, hey, we thought we did that and we're not getting anything.
Wait a minute.
If you look at the countries that have done the best with him, it's the countries where the leader is willing to swallow his or her pride and say, okay, yes, Mr. Trump, I kiss the ring. You say jump, I say how high. And we go from there. And they do that. And it's sort of, I'm sure it's humiliating for some of these leaders on a personal level. And then behind the scenes, they are negotiating those different trade deals, and they're preparing for a future in which the United States is not reliable anymore. It's about minimizing the damage that you have currently, getting a good understanding, and getting rid of uncertainty in the market with the United States. I think, especially the U.S. and Canadian economies, but I think economies in general have more resilience than we give them credit for. They can handle if there's going to be tariffs or if there's changes to trading relationships. What they can't handle is this never-ending uncertainty where you wake up one day and it's 10%, and now they're off, and now it's another. That's what governments have to get rid of to allow business to function. So, yeah, Mark Carney should be overeager. That's the job that he's supposed to be doing right now. One of the problems with Trudeau was he couldn't help himself. He so obviously loathed Donald Trump. He couldn't pursue Canada's best interest because it meant that he would have had to be self-effacing. Right. He would have had to take one on the chin. And unfortunately, that's the job of some leaders in this position. You don't always get to be the strong one in the room. And the Chinese have showed us this very well. Flatter Donald Trump, or the Saudis have also showed us this. Flatter him, say nice things to him, give him awards, make him feel like he's the most important person in the world, nominate him for his Nobel Peace Prize, and okay, you'll get the certainty and things that you crave. And then you have to be just as eager in that self-effacement as you are in preparing for the future. I hope that behind the scenes, Mark Carney is saying, okay, I'm taking it on the chin for all Canadians right now. What are we going to do so that in 10 years from now, when somebody worse than Donald Trump comes and actually starts talking about annexing portions of Canada, that we have contingency plans and options that we don't have today? Because right now, I have nothing. I can't compete with this guy. I need cards. I need things to trade with. I need to be able to protect Canada's sovereignty better. I hope that's the level of conversation that's happening behind the scenes.
That's a portion of my conversation with Jacob Shapiro of the Bespoke Group from the most recent Front Lines podcast. You can find the entire conversation, which I encourage you to do so, to go to RealAgriculture.com and hear the full discussion as we talk about the Argentine election, more about Canada-US, US-China, and more. Okay, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with more on RealAg Radio right after this. Built on over 100 years of seed innovation and unwavering commitment to farmers, Pioneer 100 Series canola hybrids deliver a step change in yield performance and agronomic traits. This isn't just better canola, it's different canola. Pioneer 100 Series. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100 series to learn more today.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hepner and Lindsay Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. It's now time for a product spotlight with BASF Canada and InVigor Hybrid Canola. Here's Lindsay Smith.
I'm Lindsay Smith with Real Agriculture, and joining me now, it's Clint Jurke. He's the Regional Technical Services Manager with BASF. Clint, welcome here.
Hey, it's always a pleasure to chat with you, Lindsay.
Yes, good to see you. All right, now, here we are in full planning mode for 2026. Feels like it gets earlier every year. Today's topic we really want to tackle is clubroot, in an incredibly important disease to consider in canola production. Where are we at as far as how this disease has evolved, and how does that inform what decisions producers may need to make for 2026?
Yeah, clubroot is one of the big four diseases that we're concerned about when it comes to canola production, and I would say like 5 years ago, clubroot was the big existential threat to the industry. But, like after 4 or 5 years of it being fairly dry through the western parts of the prairies, clubroot has kind of fallen down on the radar a little bit. It doesn't mean that it's no longer an important disease, but we just haven't seen as much of it. It hasn't been as dramatic. There are certainly some fields that have had quite a bit of disease and yield loss, but it doesn't appear to be the dramatic spread that we were seeing 5+ years ago. So that being said, I'm cautiously saying that we might be a little bit ahead of it right now. Like the dry cycle that we're in, the fact that almost every grower is using clubroot resistance now has been an effective way to keep the disease down.
Now, I mean, that's good news on the side of disease control, maybe not so good news on the side of yield when we're into a dry cycle. But it does give us, as you say, sort of an opportunity to get out in front, potentially, of this disease. We have, through lines of hybrids, we have resistance to clubroot. We have first generation and we have second generation. Can you explain those terms and why a producer may choose one over the other? And especially, I'm going to ask, is second generation just automatically better?
Yeah, great question. So first generation resistance is the resistance that came out of winter canola. It was the first resistance that all seed companies were incorporating into their canola 15 years ago. And it's proved to be very effective. Second generation resistance is basically anything that came after those initial genes that came out of there's a variety called Mendel. It's a winter canola in Europe. So it's the second generation resistance is a pretty big term. It could have some first generation resistance stacked with other genes, or it could be just other genes. And so it's not very specific, but it does help us understand, is this something new? And that's really what the second generation umbrella embodies.
And so does that mean then that first generation has a limited role, or are there still places where first generation resistance is important?
Yeah, so great question. And what you had asked earlier, which is second generation resistance automatically better? And the answer to that is it's complicated.
It depends.
You know, and that's the problem with this disease and many diseases, is that they are complicated organisms, and so unfortunately we kind of need complicated solutions. And that's not what farmers like to hear. You always want to have like an easy solution, a silver bullet to deal with these, but unfortunately it's not that way. With clubroot, the pathotypes, so the variations in the pathogen, the pathotypes that we were first dealing with 20 years ago, they're controlled by a first generation resistance. But those pathotypes are really widespread. Like we find them all the way from Peace River into Quebec. And the major pathotype there is called 3H. First generation resistance controls that. And it's the most widespread geographically pathotype. Like Saskatchewan, as an example, it's half the canola acres. Their 3H is the main pathotype. We have not seen first generation resistance fail or the pathogen overcoming first generation resistance in Saskatchewan and most of Manitoba, and in fact most of Alberta. So it's first generation resistance does work, and it's a very effective. It's when you have these new pathotypes that have evolved in the fields that are overcoming that first generation resistance is where, now you need to choose a second generation that's actually going to work. So that's the tricky bit.
Mm-hmm. Now, in that conversation, or like we have with any conversation around resistance, or a disease overcoming certain genetic resistance, et cetera, that always brings up the question of how do we manage for using these resistant hybrids? How can we keep them effective as long as possible? What other management tips sort of work into this conversation?
Yeah. So you're asking about integrated pest management, and it's a necessary tool for controlling any pest, whether it's a disease or an insect or weeds. The more tools that you can apply to controlling that pest is going to be better. Clubroot is definitely that. Like we do. And this is the reason why we saw first generation resistance. It was overcome relatively quickly in areas north of Edmonton, was because we were relying so heavily on that first generation resistance and nothing else in which to control the disease. We need to apply as many tools to manage it as possible. That will ensure the longevity of that first generation resistance. Like, first generation resistance works fantastic throughout Saskatchewan. We really don't want to see that change. And so what are the other tools for managing? You need to have a longer rotation. So that means a 2-year break from canola. But that also means that you can't grow any other hosts during that break. So any of the brassica weeds, volunteer canola, if you're not managing those, then you're growing essentially canola in a tight rotation. And patch management is a great, like if you find that it's only in one spot, grass that area in and prevent as much of that soil movement. Anything that we can do to reduce the spore load, so resistance, rotations, patch management, that's going to be a great tool when the disease is already established in your field. But you also want to prevent it from arriving in the field, and so that's where sanitation and minimum till, zero till operations are essential for managing the disease. So you need to do everything, and then that's what's going to provide the best benefit for ensuring that resistance lasts and we don't lose yield.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Now, InVigor now offers what BASF calls the most complete hybrid lineup. It's an expanded list of hybrids. How does this work into this integrated plan and help growers choose the right hybrids for their farm and really sort of complete this integrated pest management picture with hybrid selection?
Yeah, so the InVigor brand, we have 12 or so different hybrids that are available that range in different types of maturity, different disease like black leg verticillium packages, but they all do possess great pod shatter, pod drop resistance, lodging, harvestability, ease, and couple that with high-end yields. So whether you're choosing a first-generation resistance or second-generation resistance, like you get that full package of those InVigor genetics that's going to give you a much better opportunity for improved profitability at the end of the season. So it's that full suite of traits that are available for producers with whichever type of club root resistance that they're looking for.
Wonderful. All right. Clint, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Hey, this was a lot of fun. Look forward to our next one.
That was Lindsay Smith of RealAgriculture talking to Clint Jurke of BASF. If you want to find out more about the InVigor hybrid canola lineup, go to invigorresults.ca. A lot of great plot results there across Western Canada. We've got more coming up here on RealAg Radio right after this.
Ever hear that good things come to those who wait? Well, we think it's more like great rewards come to those who book their InVigor hybrid canola early. Through the InVigor Book and Buy Grower program, you could earn a $30 per bag rebate when you book all your InVigor needs by November 14th. Speak with your local retailer about eligible hybrids. Terms and conditions apply. Book early. Come out ahead.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Time is running out. If you don't act now, your canola savings for next year will be gone. Save up to $75 per bag on canola with the Calb Harvest Rewards, but only until October 31st, and it's fast approaching. Halloween is almost here. Visit decalbrewards.ca for more details. Well, the Canadian Cattle Association has some real concerns when it comes to trade with the UK and some possible things that Canada is looking to agree to. The CCA sees it as a little bit as being unscientific. And joining Lindsay Smith of RealAgriculture is Tyler Fulton, who is the president of the CCA. Here's their conversation.
Tyler, you've been busy, so good to see you home.
Yes, it's great to be home. It was about a 10-day multi-capital trip for me. So lots to talk about. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, so we'll start maybe where we don't usually talk about, but we'll start with the UK. CCA had a release that went out this week asking for the government to take some action. Catch us up. What is this about? Because this sort of has dropped off our radar, to be honest.
Yeah. So earlier this week, the government put forward legislation that would permit or confirm the UK accession into the CPTPP agreement. And we've long kind of opposed that approach, but really there's nothing that we can do about it now. It's already been confirmed by several other countries, and so that, that cow has already left the barn, so to speak. So what we're advocating for is actually a termination of what we call the continuity agreement with the UK, and that we believe if the government were to terminate that bilateral agreement, it would give us leverage to really address the non-tariff barriers that remain to access that market. Just to confirm, the 2024 numbers had UK exports to Canada at around 42 million in beef, and Canada exported 0 to the UK. So quite simply, there's not meaningful access here, and the trade is not reciprocal.
So why not? There are particular sticking points that the Canadian cattle industry has brought up many times, and I think has been at issue for a while. What is it that the UK is saying Canada doesn't meet in order to actually bring in Canadian beef?
Yes, so there's two main issues. The UK doesn't recognize our meat hygiene systems. We were looking for a full systems approval in the way that it was previously established in the CPTPP. We're concerned about the precedent that it sets in the agreement. It's been a very effective, successful, progressive agreement for the beef industry previous to the UK's admission, and so that's a critical part. The other portion is the use of growth promotants and hormones. We know that is really effective at improving efficiency, and there's not a science rationale behind why they wouldn't permit it. So those are the two main issues that are long-standing, and ideally we need to get resolved if we're going to have meaningful access.
And is it the CCA's view that potentially terminating this continuity agreement at least would sort of, is it a bargaining chip, or is it to essentially say, like, listen, UK, this isn't a two-way relationship and therefore it's over?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit of both. I think there's not the incentive for the UK to negotiate, in good faith when when we have this continuity agreement in place. And so I think we can maybe, consider using that as leverage. But the other consideration is just to really focus on science and rules-based trade. I think that those principles have served the industry extremely well, and especially in this, uncertain geopolitical environment, we need to, focus on those key principles so that we can diversify our markets effectively.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, since you brought it up, I will ask you about that. We'll end with the meetings you had with Mexico, and so we'll end on a high note, I think. But we certainly, have seen from U.S. President Donald Trump and his Ag Secretary Rollins a lot of language, and in fact, on Wednesday we saw a white paper that sort of outlined what the U.S. plans to do. But and there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between, the actual changes that the U.S. government is putting forward and a bit of the, promotion or rhetoric of this. But, I mean, the U.S. president came out and essentially said, beef prices are too high and we've got to fix them. And understandably, the pushback from, producers was quite strong for good reason. But from a trade perspective, from a trade partner perspective, where does the Canadian beef industry sort of sit when we see, rumblings like this south of the border?
Oh, well, we're extremely aligned with our U.S. counterparts. As a matter of fact, I was in Washington earlier this week while a lot of this developed, and we met with our counterparts and CBA, and share exactly the same perspective. Science based and rules based trade. And so when, there's, considerations, I guess, for interfering with functioning markets, we really grow concerned over that. Quite simply, the demand for beef has been exceptionally good. The supply is tight because, we've had some droughts and some older demographics. But quite simply, there's never been a better incentive to grow than what we've got right now. This is exactly the way that, that a market is supposed to function. And we have, what's the main issue, I think, is just a lack of understanding as to the long timeline that goes with market signals in the cattle industry. It's a long cycle.
Yeah. And that, I think, and certainly we heard exactly that from your counterparts at NCBA as well, that, the cattle industry, the supply chain is much more complicated than just the price at the grocery store. There's, the size of the cow herd and cattle movements and the integration between Canada and the U.S. and, of course, also Mexico, which sort of brings this in, which right now, that border is closed to movement of live cattle into the U.S. So it is certainly interesting to see, I think, from a political perspective, this idea of this interference in a market that can function. We'll switch gears a little bit, though, because it does sort of bring in Mexico. That is, as you alluded to at the beginning of this conversation, one of the places you were in this last loop across North America. And some really good news, I think, for the beef side. Beef figured quite prominently in a lot of the press releases and the discussions that came out of those Mexico meetings. So from your perspective, what did you experience? What meetings did you have? And what is the outlook with trade with Mexico?
Yeah, it's excellent. Really, there was two different events that I was there for. I was on, part of the trade mission with the Ag Minister in Mexico City, where we had a roundtable event, a reception, and also an announcement at Mexico's Costco. Canadian beef from JBS has moved into Costco and in Mexico, and it's had a phenomenal response from consumers there. So they were effusive about how things were going there, and it's just really a testament to the quality and the value proposition that there is there. So really great news there. The other Mexican kind of meeting that I was at was one that included four provincial ag ministers, as well as state level ag secretaries, both in Mexico and Canada, and that there was really unanimity about the desire to maintain CUSMA or USMCA as it currently is for agriculture. There's a couple of irritants, but overall it's served agriculture extremely well, and we need to maintain that in order to continue to drive growth.
So it's a bit of that meeting that you were at, as you pointed out, it is interesting because it does include quite prominently the state level agriculture, as well as, of course, our provincial ministers. How does it change the dynamic a little bit? Because you of course will sit at these tables with the federal side, and then this is the state provincial side. How do those conversations differ? Is everyone really on the same page, or are there differences between the two groups?
Oh no, you get a lot more nuanced conversations, just with what's what the sector of agriculture that's critical. I would reference the Secretary of Ag for Arizona. Has a different focus generally than what the Secretary of Agriculture has for Kansas. And, but what was really kind of remarkable is that as much as their focus was different, there was just a very consistent message. And it didn't matter even if you were from state to state or province to country to country. There was just a very consistent message that said this has been a very effective agreement for all three countries, and that we need to maintain it in its current form.
Okay. So we'll see what happens. This is, of course, sort of the lead up to that review happening in July. So, important, I would imagine, from the perspective of having everyone on side saying that this is what they want. We'll see if that is heard at the federal level. That'll be the important part on the U.S. side. All right, Tyler, thank you so much for joining me here on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, no problem.
Are you ready to make more confident decisions on the farm? Our precision agronomists and financial experts provide tailored recommendations that align field performance with your business goals and deliver real financial results. Success starts in the soil. Book your appointment today at mmp.ca. We've got more Real Ag Radio coming up right after this. The future of phosphorus fertilizers is Rhizazorb. Craig Dick, VP of Sales and Marketing for Phospholutions, explains.
Rhizazorb 839.0 is a next-generation dry phosphate fertilizer that replaces MAP or DAP. Risosorb technology is incorporated into traditional phosphate manufacturing, resulting in a finished granule that enhances phosphorus uptake, reduces phosphorus use rates, and maintains crop yields.
Preserve yield, optimize phosphorus, and reduce costs with Risosorb.
I'm Lindsay Smith, host of The Agronomist, and I want to thank you for tuning in for over 200 episodes of our beloved little program. Join me Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube for our live and interactive agronomy Q&A. Each week, our guest panel will handle some of your toughest agronomic questions live, streaming on YouTube, Facebook, X, and RealAgriculture.com. Tune in Monday nights or go to RealAgriculture.com/agronomist and sign up for our email notifications and don't miss an episode.
The Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute is driving bold policy solutions for resilient Canadian agri-food system and building a stronger future for Canadian agriculture in general. Visit capi-icpa.com to discover more. Recently, I was down in North Carolina at the headquarters for BASF and had a chance to catch up with Neil Bentley, who's the VP of Market Management based out of Raleigh.
VP of Market Management. Okay, what is that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm responsible for our North American strategy, portfolio management for our crop protection business and our seeds and traits business, and also looking at new technologies, digital farming as an example, sustainability activities, and scouting around the edges for new crop protection technologies and other digital areas where we might plug into our North American business to really help farmers continue to drive innovation and opportunity.
Now, there's a lot of exciting stuff in there. Very cool. Yes. You're on the leading edge, trying to see the trajectory of where everything's headed. The reality is right now, right here, it's a pretty tough farm economy out there. How do you combine that excitement with what some of the financial realities is for the farmer right now?
Well, you're right. I think that what we're seeing across the ag economy is challenging, right? Currently, commodity prices are more depressed than they've been in the past few years. We see an increase in costs in some areas for farmers. And I think farmers are really looking at their balance sheets, especially as they're moving into 2026 and building their plans. And we look at that excitement for innovation because we're trying to help farmers do more with less. We're trying to bring innovation to the table that really sweats the resources that they have, that allows them to earn a positive ROI on everything they do. An example of this, if you think about digital farming, you'd say, well, hey, there's maybe a new expense that a farmer might not want, might really challenge in the current environment. But if you look at it the other way and say, well, what I can do is help make sure that the decisions that you're making on your farm are actually going to have a positive outcome, are actually going to have an ROI. So I have more confidence in the decisions I'm making. Then all of a sudden you start looking at those innovations in those new areas as opportunities for improving your ROI, not necessarily an expense. We want to shift that from expense to investment and return on investment.
Yeah, on that topic specifically, one of the things that I talk to a lot of the audience about, or try to get feedback on, is a lot of times we'll think about, okay, I don't want to do that this year because of the upfront cost, instead of evaluating based on, okay, so there's the upfront cost, but if I'm getting a positive return, if I'm spending $20 an acre, I'm getting 60, or I should keep that versus spending $20 an acre and I'm only getting 10 back. Well, yeah, you should cut that out. Product specific. There needs to be more tools and ability to do that for the farmer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where the R&D background comes in, especially, across the states and into Canada. We have our research and development areas really, plugged into those climatic zones, into those soil zones to make sure that the things that we're doing are actually going to pan out on a farmer's field. So you're getting that local data, you're getting that local InVigor, seed result. So how that performance is. We're building that confidence, and our team's able to represent those things to you that are really going to make a difference in your farm.
So in this kind of a market, do you cut back on some of that innovation spend, or is this when you pedal down and forge ahead?
Well, innovation is such a long-term time frame. It's the world is changing in front of us each and every day, but we have to make plans over the next 10 or 15 years to develop those ideas and those compounds for the future. And so it's something that we have to do continuously, and it's something that we will continue to do continuously. We invest about 11% of every dollar earned back into research and development.
Revenue or net profit?
Revenue,
okay.
back into research and development. And so we expect to continue to do that so that we can bring the new seed technology, the new trait technology, a long pipeline of opportunities, and new crop protection and digital initiatives to the table so that farmers continue to have those options that they're going to need. That just because the financial world is a little bit more challenging doesn't mean that Mother Nature isn't changing, what's happening out in the field. And so we need to make sure that we're prepared for that.
Well, massive consequences if you back off of research and development now. Those consequences are not felt now. It'll look better on the income statement for the company, but those impacts are felt 10, 20 years out on the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely, and those are the plans that we're making, and that's the anticipation of where the market's going that I have a lot of fun with. It's I don't have a crystal ball, but I do try to utilize all of the forecasting tools and systems and artificial intelligence and bring that to the table to be able to anticipate where we're going, so that we can anticipate what's going to happen and really have those solutions for the farmers. If you think about weed resistance in the late 1990s, and I say I'm from the 1900s, so I feel like I'm, super old. But when you get into that, you'd say, well, hey, when Roundup Ready technology in the States was introduced, nobody was talking a lot about weed resistance. But we were part of developing the first herbicide technology in Kixor, which is heat in Canada, as a compound that was going to combat weed resistance, and that was launched in 2009. But looking back, you'd say, well, who was crazy enough to continue to develop a herbicide when everybody said there wasn't going to be herbicide resistance?
We would never need another herbicide.
We would never need another one again. But yet that happened, and here we are today. More complex herbicide recommendations go into every acre than we've had in the past 20 years, and this is where farmers need the support of companies who continue innovation and R&D efforts.
So on the innovation planning and strategy, how far out are you working?
Yeah, so we're working on a 10-year time horizon for our crop protection business and a 20-year time horizon on our seeds and traits business.
Okay, and seed and traits being longer because of regulatory approval, or why the difference?
Yeah, the seeds and traits regulatory timeline is quite a bit longer, just to get the total global approach for all of the trades and whatnot, and so this just takes a bit longer in time.
Okay, so let us pull us behind the curtain here, under the hood, so to speak, of BASF. Where are we headed? What are some things that we're maybe doing now that maybe we won't do, or you think that are going to be added to the way we do? Like, what does it look like?
Yeah, and I think that comes back to this idea of systems. We've spent a lot of time talking about individual indications and how you can individually use a herbicide or individually use a fungicide or a seed trait. And what we continue to see is we have to bring those systems together, and we have to optimize the inputs all the way across. So we're looking at that integration as we move forward, and that integration having secondary benefits. So if you think about where we're going, sustainability is going to be a much larger topic as we move into the future. Whether we're talking about nitrogen management in Canada or we're talking about lower carbon scoring in other parts of the world, thinking about how a system works together to bring not just a high yielding crop to the table, but also measuring what the carbon intensity or the nutrient utility was of that crop will be important for consumers in the future and for those industries that look to decarbonize. And so these are areas that we will continue to work across all of those efforts, but what it really comes back to is how it all connects.
Yeah. What impact does like a See and Spray, where we're targeted, there's the weed, kill the weed instead of spraying over a broad acre on every single piece of the farm. What impact does that have on the company? Because people would say, well, selling less herbicide, not good for you. Do you see it that way, or what's your thoughts?
We think we're very much in support of the See and Spray technology, and we have a joint venture with Bosch we call One Smart Spray, where we're actually invested in that area. And so this is something that we see as a future technology that will be very important, whether you're looking at See and Spray or drones or other precision techniques. That's what maximizing your ROI looks like. And so a lot of the applications for herbicides in this example have always been, with that Roundup Ready world that we talked about, were made in these post-application systems, right? And so where we see See and Spray having an impact is in those post-application systems where we may be able to use less herbicide in those later applications. But the true benefit is reinvesting a portion of those resources back into early residual herbicide applications and ensuring that your crop is clean from the very beginning. That's a really important thing, and it's more and more important today, especially considering that the post-applied products aren't necessarily controlling all of those weeds due to weed resistance. So it really is a bit of a mix of savings and reinvestment that ultimately creates a better system for the farmer.
Because weed resistance is kind of a candle burning at both ends. I've talked about this before, where very, very difficult to get new products registered, challenging. We're also losing old products being taken off the shelf. Meanwhile, the weed resistance is expanding while the tools are shrinking. It's a real challenge for the farmer and innovators like BASF.
That's right. And so good news is, longer term, as we talk about research and development, we have some new mode of action herbicides coming down the pipeline. We also have some traits and trait enablement with those new herbicides that will ultimately create new systems for farmers to combat weed resistance. So longer term, as we're talking in the early 2030s, 2032, there's new technologies on the horizon. But in the meantime, we have a lot of work to do. We have to think about those tools that we have in our arsenal, so to speak, and arranging those with all of the capabilities that we have to make sure that farmers have the best opportunity for profit, especially now.
Yeah, Neil, you never mentioned biologicals. Like, that's all I hear about is biologicals and the potential truth or pipe dream.
No, I think biocontrol opportunities, there are, BASF is one of the largest biological companies in terms of the seed treatments that we sell each and every day. So really helping those seeds spring out of the soil and make sure that they are as healthy as possible for those early season diseases, insects, and climatic situations that are existing. But ultimately, we're in that game looking for that breakthrough technology. We spend a lot of time thinking about biocontrol. We think about those markets where there is the highest level of impact for biologicals. Those are generally in the specialty crop markets, where you have pre-harvest interval, lower MRL, quicker export markets. These areas where there's opportunities really to have some breakthrough technologies, and we're treating those crops in less broad application and maybe more, let's say not niche, but more individual types of applications. And here we see the opportunity for those biologicals that are more sensitive to the environment, that need a little bit more care, that are part of a complete system to actually be part of that. And so we try to work with innovators and new organizations to bring those to the market and identify paths that are really complementary to the portfolio.
Yeah, complementary. You said that word because I think a lot of times when people talk about this, it's a substitute conversation, moving away from synthetic to biologicals. But I hear more and more people talking about that combo, that synergistic benefits of using both together.
Absolutely. It is that combination. And if we think of some of those specialty crops where you're using rotations with 4, 5, 6, 7 applications of different technologies, really you can start to work in a rotation of a high-performing biological in a way that helps the farmers not only meet the quality needs that they have for those particular crops, but also then the market needs that they're seeing from the consumers that want those. And so smart rotations, smart integrations, the complementary nature of those portfolios can really help out.
Great stuff. Well, hey, Neil, I really appreciate you joining us here today. Looking forward to being on a panel with you later on today at the Farm Voice event. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Shaun.
That was my conversation with Neil Bentley, VP of Market Management with BASF, based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. Enjoyed our trip down there a couple weeks ago, and we got more interviews coming from that as well. We had a great event there with some of the internal staff at BASF from that day. Okay, if you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the Real Life Feedback line or text it, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everyone, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. We'll talk again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody. And welcome to the bonus section of RealAg Radio here today. We're going to go through the top ag news stories of the day. We're so excited to be back in the host seat. We're doing bonus stuff. Okay, so up first, I'm curious how many of you stayed up for Blue Jays baseball last night. There were 18 innings, 2 games in one night. A few people said, I'm sure you stayed up. I didn't. I fell asleep in the 9th inning at the conclusion of it. But woke up this morning, went through the highlights that I had PVR'd, and yeah, tough loss for the Blue Jays, but hopefully we'll go and get him there tonight. Shohei Ohtani, of course, if he didn't do enough damage yesterday with his 2 home runs and 2 doubles, He is going to be the starting pitcher for the Dodgers tonight against Shane Bieber. So I'll tune into that. Hopefully the Blue Jays can tie up that series before they go to Game 5. All the other big news, before we get into some of the things that Prime Minister Mark Carney is doing, how about former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau? Any of you got thoughts on his new relationship with Katy Perry? That's big news. Big pop culture news here at Real Agriculture. I'm sure some of you have some very, very interesting thoughts and threads on that relationship. And as I got one person texted me yesterday, hopefully she takes him to the moon or Mars or where next time she goes to space. But that's being kind of mean, you guys. Don't be like that. You can't be mean like that. Okay, 2 major farm organizations are calling on Ottawa to give Canadian farmers better access to market data. The Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan and Sask Crops, representing over 24,000 farmers, won a national export sales reporting program. This would be similar to systems in the U.S. and the EU. I am here to tell you, hooray. I am right behind you on this one. I think it's incredibly frustrating. We do not have the liquidity of data on things like export sales reports like they have in the U.S. or the EU. I think it would really add more clarity to farmers. It would provide more clarity to market analysts. And more data is better. And I'm right behind these farm organizations in Saskatchewan for saying this. These farm organizations say that Canadian producers are at a major disadvantage without timely export and sales information. A study by Mercantile Consulting found closing the data gap could add more than $56 million a year to farm revenues by improving price transparency, forecasting, and planning across the grain sector. There is no doubt, though, the grain sector is going to be saying, ooh, competitive, like this is really going to hurt. There's not enough competitors in the market, and so therefore it's going to actually create problems and issues between competitors. That we hear this the same thing in the packing industry as well, where we don't have a box beef price for Canada. We have to use the U.S. number for the very same sort of objection. So I think this is a good thing. I think it's something that maybe we should run some pilot projects on, and we'll find out that, it didn't really create a problem, and it was more to the upside. But those are my thoughts. I would love to hear yours. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Prime Minister Mark Carney says he will meet Chinese President Xi Jinping this week, just days after U.S. President Donald Trump broke off trade talks with Canada. Trump was angered by an Ontario government TV ad criticizing his tariffs, has threatened another 10% levy on Canadian imports. He hasn't provided a lot of clarity on when that's going to take place and how they're going to do that. But the threat was made very clear the end of last week. We talked to Jacob Shapiro. I played that audio for you earlier on today's show. So if you missed that, make sure you go back and listen to it. And you can hear the full interview with Jacob at RealAgriculture.com. But for Canadian farmers, the China meeting between Carney and Xi Jinping could be critical. Beijing has slapped tariffs on canola seed, canola oil, peas, pork, and seafood, which are all key exports for the agricultural sector, as a part of a long-running trade dispute. Carney says diversifying markets and rebuilding ties with Beijing is essential if Canada is to double non-U.S. exports over the next decade. Speaking of China, they are considering buying nearly 10 million tons of U.S. soybeans to cover domestic feed demand through February. That would be the conclusion of the traditional soybean buying window. It would be one of the largest single purchases since trade talks resumed and could give U.S. farmers a much-needed boost before South America's harvest comes online in the spring. For Washington, the timing is super critical. President Trump has made reopening Chinese demand central to his farm recovery strategy as farmers wait on delayed support payments during the government shutdown. Analysts say the deal could lift soybean futures and help clear heavy Midwest stockpiles. Though China is expected to pivot back to Brazil and Argentina in early 2026, some analysts are going to say this is good. It's not great. And timing is important here because would they make all of that purchase between, we've only got 3 months here. If it'd be end of February, it would be 4 months. So a quarter of the year. That is a lot of soybeans in a short period of time. We'll have to see here. But the story continued from Jim Wiesmeyer, where he said the move signals a thaw in U.S.-China trade ties and brings a rare jolt of optimism to farm country during an otherwise uncertain stretch. Something I would add to that is what happens to this ad hoc farm programming they're talking about. They haven't been able to roll out because of the government shutdown. If they buy 10 million tons of soybeans, does that mean that is off the table? that's something to watch out. Timing will be super critical on that. We'll stay with what's going on in D.C. President Donald Trump says he intends to bring down beef prices. He was joking when he said, well, some would say he's joking, others are taking great offense to it, where he said maybe ranchers are doing too well right now. He made the remarks during a dinner with business leaders in Tokyo, adding that beef is one of the areas where prices have not fallen. At the same time, Washington is moving to expand imports of Argentine beef. A new agreement would quadruple quotas to 80,000 tons, keeping a 10% tariff in place. The deal comes as U.S. cattle inventories tighten and demand for high-quality traceable meat grows. And I've seen numerous pieces of commentary from people that follow the beef markets very, very closely. 80,000 tons of lean, like ground beef is not going to exactly really bring down prices to the extent that the president is promising here. Ranchers very upset with the idea of the quadrupling of the quota from Argentina, and President Trump claiming that he's the reason why ranchers are profitable right now in the first place. There is a lot. This is a news story with a lot of lack of clarity. That's maybe the way to put it. President Trump and Japan's new Prime Minister Takahashi, I think is how you say that, pledged to launch a new golden age of U.S.-Japan relations. Speaking aboard the USS George Washington near Tokyo, Trump praised the new female prime minister and promised America's full support. The two leaders emphasized deeper cooperation on security, trade, and critical minerals. The Japanese prime minister vowed to raise Japan's defense spending and strengthen its role in Asia, while Trump's announcement approval of 2 missile sales for Japan's F-35 jets. There was a lack of details when it comes to some of the agriculture component of this, just lack of details in general. Secretary Rollins, though, reiterated that Japan will buy more commodities. Japan will buy $8 billion in U.S. corn, soybeans, rice, ethanol, and other goods. USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins says in a post that she actually posted that on X. But this is not really new news. If you go back to September 5th fact sheet from the White House on the U.S.-Japan deal reached on July 22nd, where she said American farmers and producers will immediately benefit from the deal with Japan's commitment to purchase $8 billion of U.S. agricultural goods, including corn, soybeans, fertilizer, bioethanol, and sustainable aviation fuel. So again, agriculture is happy that it wants commodities in some of these deals the president is negotiating, but the market really wants to see some follow through instead of just the headlines and the vocal showcase of intent. And Prime Minister Carney is also, he's very, very busy, like I said earlier in the news here, trying to double non-U.S. exports in a very short period of time. And he's got his work cut out for himself. Indeed, for companies, they are really there's a lot of instability right now in the trade arena. And the market's a little bit numb to it, although soybeans have been up early here in the week on the potential of that deal. And we'll have to see if canola can follow and have build up some momentum to the upside as well with the overall veg oil complex. If you have any feedback on the news or anything you heard on the show today, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Thanks for tuning in to RealAg Radio and downloading the RealAg Radio podcast. And we'll talk again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.